What's up, y'all? Jessica here. Thank you for clicking on this video. Welcome to this video. This is my first book club discussion or book discussion in a very, very long time. I was supposed to do this back in January, but being a new mom of three and a stepdaughter is challenging. Okay. I continue to say that because I want y'all to hang in here with me, even if I have to take a break for a week or two. Anyways, I'm Jessica Simeon Lofton, and you're either watching on my personal channel, the Jessica Diaries, or on the Unlearning Anti-Blackness Book Club channel. Either way, welcome. I started this book club in response to a lot of anti-black attitudes, beliefs, and I guess stereotypes or whatever you want to call it that I was encountering in my personal life. I realize that a lot of people just don't really know the history of America and how that history has affected Black Americans and how it continues to affect us in ways beyond just racism and police brutality. There are so many more ways we are impacted by what happened in history. And so I developed a passion for that over the last couple of years. And I love to read. I love to create content, so it just made sense to do a book club. So if you are into that, if you support that, you can support me financially. Supporting this content helps me get new equipment such as lighting, camera, software that I need, helps me to do branding stuff. Your support goes a long way. Shout out to my patron Erica for all of her support the last year. And you can visit patreon.com/Jessica Simeon Lofton if you want to check out the membership options available. And I'm going to be posting some exclusive Patreon stuff really, really soon. It's going to be very good. My friend told me to save it for Patreon. So if you want to see some stuff that you won't be able to see here on YouTube, definitely support me there. And you don't have to join right away. If you want to just sign up for my community and get those updates and then join financially at a later time, you can do that also. I share a lot of free stuff there as well. I'm kind of using Patreon as my website because it just makes sense for what I see in my head that I'm trying to do. Because if I didn't do it this way, I have like a million different websites. So I'm trying to condense it into the platforms that make the most sense for the whatever particular project it is. So anyway, what we are discussing today is the book by Edward Baptist, The Half Has Never Been Told. This is a really, really good, thorough, data providing book that I think anyone who cares about what's going on with Black Americans politically, especially as it relates to reparations, needs to read. And that's actually why I chose this book, because of the conversation around reparations, because I was finding myself having to explain to people why Black Americans deserve reparations. And you're met with all these questions and these but this, if this. And so I really wanted to arm myself with the facts. So that's how I got into this book. And if you don't keep track of the history, like Jason Black said, you lose control of the present. So politically, the conversations about reparations have been picking up. And you need to make sure you're controlling the narrative by reminding politicians, reminding the public what happened to Black Americans through slavery, Jim Crow, the oppression we face today. You can't make a case if you don't have the facts. And this book has some undeniable facts. I mean, there's a half that has never been told, and that is the way that Black Americans built this country. You may not like that, depending on who you are and came across this video, but that's a fact. It is. And in this book discussion, I will be sharing with you why. So for today, I'll be talking about chapters 1 and 2 of this book. And these are pre-recorded videos. You might have already seen me make an edit here or there because I feel like I ramble a lot when I'm getting started. But these are pre-recorded videos, and I want to eventually move to live streams. I love doing live streams and taking comments and answering questions and things like that. So as this grows, I will go back to doing live streams. Now, let's talk about the author of this book and just really get into my first impressions of it. I think I'm in chapter 5. These are some very long chapters, and I write notes, I highlight notes, so it takes me a little bit of time. But I have developed a couple of you know, early thoughts about the book already. Now, the author is Edward Baptist. He's a history professor at Cornell University, and his research focus is the enslavement of African Americans in the South. So this is what he does. He is well qualified to write this book. Now, I love the main title of this book, The Have Has Never Been Told: Slavery and the Making of American Capitalism, because it's not just this half that hasn't been told. It's so many other halves, so many stories that have not been told about the impacts of slavery, about the impact of slavery on America, but also the individuals. And I first heard of this book when Yvette Carnell assigned it for her own book club, and I was immediately interested in it. And it is a little difficult to read, just from a, I guess, like a academic point of view. Like, this reminds me of grad school. Reading this book reminds me of being in grad school. But it's also difficult as a Black person to really take in some of this information. And most books about history and slavery are that way. They're difficult to read. And there were times where I did have to put it down. I'm all about mental health. So I think it's very important that I put that out there, that this book is difficult to digest. I'm still reading the book, but right off the bat, if I had to give a critique, it would be this term of forced migrations. Let's call it slavery. Slaves, slave owners, not enslavers. Let's call things what they are, because I believe that it softens what's actually going on. These people own people. They bought and sold people. They kidnapped people from their homes and their families and tortured them until the day that they died. Okay? It's nothing soft about this. And if you want to be respectful in writing this book, I feel like the respect should have been for the slaves and the descendants of slavery, such as us, not the people who were responsible for this. They don't deserve any respect. Okay? People still disrespect Black people today as if Black folks didn't build America. Our ancestors built this country and made America into what it is today in terms of its standing in the world. Well, that standing is dipping more and more by the day, but you get what I mean. And of course, we weren't slaves ourselves, but our ancestors were. And we're in a different form of slavery now. It's mental, and it's mental because of this history that has not been told, that has not been taught. And so that's what we're here to do tonight. So I think that's enough. Let's go ahead and get into chapter 1. This chapter is called Feet. So if you've been reading this, if you have not read it yet, he titles the chapters as body parts to kind of, to continue on the theme of slavery, people owning bodies, Black bodies. So chapter 1 is Feet. And it focuses on the 80-year span in which over 1 million Africans walked into the new slavery. So if you think about 700 miles, that's the trick that many of these slaves were taking. That's 1.5 million steps. And they covered that much ground over the course of weeks. I thought that was very, very interesting. That he had that detail there. Could you imagine walking 700 miles in a month or two? Like, that is crazy. So by 1670, and what I'm doing is I'm just talking about the things that I highlighted. So I have my notes here, and then I have them on another window that you can't see. So by 1670, custom and law insisted that children were slaves if their mothers were. I think this is something that we can talk about too, as it relates to the differences that you see in biracial people who were raised by their white moms versus biracial people that we hear raised by their black moms. So already I'm seeing a connection here, because you have this going on TikTok right now where people are talking about the racism that they saw in their biracial families and how their moms didn't check it or their dads didn't check it. So there is a difference between those biracial people being raised by a white mom versus a black mom. And I think this law and this custom, that's already setting the stage for that, or it could have set the stage for that. This is me guessing if I had to point to something. Also, enslaved Africans had no rights. So now you see where we fight for rights. We fight for well, we all can vote, but like we fight to keep our freedom of speech. We're fighting to keep guns. Some of us who we are, pro gun or whatever. Imagine not even having rights to fight for. We always talk about slavery and what the people went through, but we don't can you really just try to put yourself in that position and the vulnerability you would feel if you had absolutely no rights? You can't call the police for help. You can't expect the citizen next to you to help because you're their property. It's crazy. I couldn't even imagine that. Law also insisted that enslaved Africans were perpetual outsiders, even if they converted to Christianity, which, of course, if you know my story, this really, really stuck out to me because I experienced a level of, or a byproduct of this in a mixed race church where everything was tailored to the white members. Nobody wanted to talk candidly about race and the issues that we still face. And there were certain black people in the church that hung out with each other, and then there were other black people who were more accepted by the other race. Even though we were all Christians, some of us were still outsiders because there was really no effort to connect with us and to learn us and learn about our backgrounds. We were like not me, because I kind of went between the crowds, but somebody like my husband was some folks just would not even speak to him. So this stuff is still going on. It's still going on. We see traces of this. So the next law or custom related to black folks was that everyone of visible African descent was assumed to be a slave. Same like we see the different stereotypes that black people deal with, how black people are always saying, we're not a monolith, we're all different. And this isn't it. So many of us stress our differences that they don't understand that you're still black. And that is how it's been since the beginning. And that's how it will always be. So you need to get together on that. Again, what y'all think about that? Tell me if I'm onto something or if I'm reaching. I want to know in the comments. Let me know if there's a reach, but that's what I think. I like to try to, throw out there how we could see these things still happening now. And what assumptions do people have about all black folks today, black Americans? Because I'm realizing that even immigrants who are black immigrants, such as, Africans, Jamaicans, Haitians, or whatever, they have attitudes about black Americans that have been shaped by white people. So we're still struggling with these things. We're still dealing with these things. So I want to point out on page 6, in 1782, Native Americans began to raid settlements, taking slaves with them as they retreated. So this is something that is very, very connected to the reparations conversation right now. Okay. A lot of people, especially, I believe Joe Biden made this comment in one of his speeches or during a debate or something when he was asked about reparations. And he was saying that there was not even a conversation to be had unless Native Americans were included in it, even though we could argue that they've already gotten their reparations. Here's a problem with it right here. Native Americans took slaves with them, and they didn't take them for them to be free. They took them as their own property. So there's a problem with including Native Americans, or if not there's a problem, but mainly there's a stumbling block, because you don't get to say that you face the same type of oppression that Black people face as a Native American when you actually owned us. You know, no Black person in history has ever owned a Native American. So there's something right there that people do not talk about when it comes to reparations when Native Americans are brought into the conversation. So yeah, that's on page 6 if you want to read that for yourself or make a note. Moving on, supporting slavery's expansion was considered to be one of the best ways to unite Southern and Northern politicians. So allowing slavery to continue and to expand meant that everybody was going to be unified politically. So imagine, or if you can think about things that have unified us politically, the pandemic, it was the first time that you saw, let's say, your activist type of Black people in alignment with your moderate, liberal white folks in like direct lockstep. Like we are totally unified on the fact that the pandemic is blah 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 blah, and people should either get blah 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 or wear blah 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 blah. So there would have been the same thing. Let's just allow them to expand slavery, because this is the one thing we'll get them to kind of come together on. If we emphasize this for these people and we emphasize that for these people, they will be unified. So Black people were a bargaining tool for America's politics. Still are. We still are. And 4 of the first 5 presidents were slaveholders. 8 of the first 12 owned slaves. So you can't think that presidents who were actually owning the slaves were ever going to do anything to help them, because it would completely go against their own lives, their own livelihood. And those presidents, including the slave owners, helped to shape the nation's policy of economic growth around slavery. The people that it would benefit were the ones who were creating a policy around it. On page 13, the story of the enslaved men and women begging to be purchased with their spouses was very heartbreaking for me, and it made me think about a lot of different things that we see now, especially if you look at the concept, but really the ramifications of abroad marriages, as it puts it in the book. So let me go back. Page 13 talks about abroad marriages. Some were abroad husbands, men owned by other enslavers, but who had been allowed Saturday night visits with their wives and who were now watching the dawn in their marriages. Some were abroad wives who had risen at 3 a.m. to walk to the plantation, bringing the last change of clothes they would ever wash for their husbands. Holding the hands of parents who were staying were sobbing sons and daughters. Okay, so if you look at that concept of abroad marriages and how it tore apart a family, you can kind of see some of the ramifications of that through the breakdown of the Black family now and these gender wars that are going on between Black men and women. Because you could say that this manosphere stuff, there are 2 sides of it. There is a white side of it and a Black side. Is everything like it's all everything's like that. So even in the manosphere, as big as the man, or I ain't gonna say big, but as influential as the manosphere is, and with the reach that it has on the white side of it and the Black side of it, you still don't see white women at large critiquing their men online, but you do see Black women doing so. So reading about that, the way that these plantation owners and these slave owners allowed the husbands to go, or the wives to go to the plantation on a Saturday to see the husband, and the kids are crying, and then the wife got to come back, or the husband is leaving or whatever. That's traumatic, and that trauma is passed down. And so I think when we think about the manosphere, just to bring my point home, when we think about the manosphere and the white side of it and the black side of it, the black side of it reveals a lot of cracks in our family foundation. It's because it's bigger than just relationship preferences. A lot of these women and men are so deeply traumatized by what they saw growing up and what their parents went through, and just going on back in the ancestral line, that some of these attitudes are causing problems for their relationships today. Our community has issues that run deep, really, really deep. And that's why I cannot stand these cooning, sellout black people who just sell out their community every day for likes, for views, for approval. You can have conservative values without being a self-hating, sellout, coon black person. Like your Candace Owens, like your Brandon Tatums, your Tim Scotts, other people who closely align themselves with the Republican Party or the conservative movement, and they further these racial stereotypes about their own people. So you got different type of coons, right? You have some who they just like show out in front of white folks. They just want to be seen, or they want to be accepted and loved, and they laugh at the stale jokes, and they drink the nasty beer, and they eat the nasty food. But they're not there talking about black people, right? But then you have your Candace Owens and your Brandon Tatums, who not only are they intermingling in love, associating with white folks, especially being married to them and having children with them, they're also talking down on your own race. So that's a different type of coon. So you can have conservative values without hating yourself and hating the other people that look like you, because there are some things that I lean more conservative on, such as like the LGBT agenda. But as the saying goes, even a broken clock is right twice a day. They only fight against the LGBT agenda because of their religious beliefs, not because they like black children or they care about black children, because many of them have biracial children, and they're always going to say, well, my kids have a white side. So you can't make this stuff up. You cannot make this stuff up. America broke up the black family. America stripped us of our family values. America, some black people suffered so much trauma from slavery that they thought that turning on their own race would help them. Some it did help, but one thing about it, they always break their tools. White supremacy always breaks its tools. So that's how you see Kamala get no love, because she up there cooning out for Joe Biden. So does what America did excuse what's happening now? Because some people are saying, oh, well, you're trying to excuse what black men do, or what the ghetto people do, or the ratchet, the pookies, the Rayways. You're trying to excuse it. And I'm not excusing any type of bad behavior in the black community. But what I am saying, and because I'm going to talk about it, like I'm going to talk about the bad behavior in our community, because we need to check that. But it's sick to destroy a family and then question them and play dumb about why their community is broken. That's sick and evil completely. So off that rant, moving on to something else. I thought it was really interesting how they gave the slaves whiskey once an hour to manage their emotions. So they were basically, as these slaves are walking for days and days, and going through the woods and the rain and the mud, and they're going to an auction block. They're giving them whiskey, turning them into alcoholics. They're becoming dependent on this alcohol to manage the emotion of them not totally losing their minds. Like, this is sick. What happened to Black people, these Africans who were kidnapped and forced to come to America to be slaves? It is evil. Evil. And this is the stuff that we know. This is the stuff that people have talked about. What about the things they can't remember? The unimaginable things that they can't even remember, because some victims black out and they don't even remember the abuse that's happening to them. So this is the stuff that they could remember. We can't even fathom experiencing it today. We can't. And early on in this book, we see in chapter 1, we see religion introduced into an already complex issue. As soon as slavery began to boom, you have your religious conversation to come up. And believe it or not, regional associations of preachers, Baptist preachers and other churches, they actually punished ministers who preached against slavery. And so now this is the conversation that I love to have. I love to have, because Black folks do not want to talk about how you have a sector or a community of people in your racial group, as religious as you are, who they just don't want to hear anything about Christianity. They don't want to hear it. You can't get them to go to church. They will never go to church, because this is the stuff that they've learned that nobody wants to deal with and talk about and come together as an issue. This is why I always say, and you learn this, especially if you follow your intellectuals in this movement, we have no friends, we have no allies, because just like back in the day, you had the Preachers Association telling them, don't you preach against slavery. Don't you dare preach against it. Now you have pastors who don't want to even talk about it. So you still have religion that's watered down or that's misused and abused to fit political agendas. It's the same thing when it comes to calling out systemic racism, not just your prejudice or whatever, the system of racism, the system, and educating people on the real history and showing them how these dots connect. This is a priority. This should be a priority if you really want change. This is something that we could all do right now that would change a lot of things. But people are not doing it because they still want to fit agendas. So if you're in a church and you're not talking about these things, you're not taking action, you're not educating your congregation, you're not allowing people to speak their truth and what they're experiencing and the way that it makes them question God, then you ain't for real about change. Period. You're continuing this systemic racism by not calling it out and talking about it. And it was the one thing for me why I had to step away from church. I still believe, I'm a believer, but I am not quick to label myself as a Christian, because Christianity has a lot of issues that need to be dealt with before we try to convert everybody. It's a lot of things in-house that I think we could do that would immediately make the world better. So that's why I feel like Christianity still has some type of agenda. What that agenda is right now, I don't know. I ain't gonna say I don't know. I can't articulate it fully in the time that I want to spend here on this video. But there's some political agendas still at play within the church. And until the church is ready to really deal with its issues, you're going to see a lot of more people falling away from, doing the whole church on a weekend type thing. But I'm definitely not going on that rant. Let's go to page 18 to 22, where it talks about Charles Ball. And when I was watching the interviews with the author, there was one, and I'll have it on Patreon as a link. There was one where Edward Baptist said that while reading Charles Ball's story, he began to see how slavery was especially violent for men who had something to fight for. And I still, again, I'm gonna say this probably every video discussion multiple times. I see that now where Black men who have something to fight for, I mean, you have us to fight for, women, children, our community. It's especially harder for the men because the men are the ones who are gonna fight. The men's have the strength. The men's, excuse me. The men are their men are stronger than women. Men are going to be, as a whole, a lot more quicker to put themselves in the line of fire for their spouses and their children. So if you are trying to destroy a people, you destroy their men. And then now you see even something more sinister with Black folks is that you have the men who America and the world is already trying to destroy. They're destroying themselves. Now the women help to destroy them. The kids are not being raised by both. And you just see this pattern continue. And Charles Ball's story was heartbreaking. It was very, very heartbreaking to read about how he was kidnapped and he was begging to see his wife and children, but they refused him the opportunity to see them. And it was because of safety for the people that were gonna put him in chains, because they're like, well, this man is being ripped from his family. He's being ripped from everything he loves to be a slave. He might kill you. So let's just not even let him see them. Who knows what he'll do if he sees them, and we've already made this transaction. And it also goes on to talk about his family and how they were split among different owners. And again, just saying that slavery tore apart Black American families or African American families is not enough. To have an entire family, everyone's being owned. First of all, the fact that you're a slave, but secondly, this family's going, the sister's going to their plantation, the brother's going to their plantation, the mama's going to their plantation, the husband's going to, I mean, some of these accounts in this book could bring you to tears if you are somebody like me, where you really take in and really think about what you're reading. It's super, super sad, super sad. So I want to go on and talk about the slave couples that they talked about in the book. There was something that was very interesting to me, because I don't know if I've ever looked at a couple in depth and really thought about what it must be like to be part of one. But a slave couple, as you can see on the screen, was a group of enslaved people chained together and marched from one place or another. I didn't know that couple was the proper term for that. And what really stuck out to me is that pregnant women were often part of these. Like, I just had a baby last year, and I didn't even want to walk. In my 9th month of pregnancy, toward the end, I didn't even want to walk to the car in the parking lot. We were at a hotel, and I remember like just every step I took going past the tennis court out to the car from the room. Every step I took, I feel like I was gonna pee. Could you imagine being pregnant, walking 700 miles over a couple weeks? They were covering, according to the book, about 10 to 20 miles a day on the regular. Pregnancy? You're pregnant and then your neck is in chain, your feet, like, come on. And the book also says that when they found a loose link or a broken link, they would basically escape and kill the slave traders. So, like, just imagine the energy. Like, the slave trader on edge, he already doing something inhumane. He's evil. The people, they're not understanding this. You have they're in close proximity. The men, they're on the chains, so I can take off a woman from the chain and go rape her. She's screaming and hollering. I'm over here chained up, can't do nothing. Then it says on page 25, this was like, I never thought about this on that second paragraph, that the couples caused issues among the slaves. Like, not only were they fighting or, or trying to plot on the slave trader who was transporting them, they started to have issues with one another. It says at the bottom of page 25, relationships between the enslaved could play out as a conflict or alliance or both. People were angry, depressed, despairing, sick of each other's smell and the noises they made, how they walked too fast or slow, how no one could even piss or shit by themselves. At night, lying too close, raw wrists and sore feet aching. Men in chains or women in ropes argued, pushed, tried to enforce their will. Like, that is unimaginable. Oh my goodness, I could not imagine it. I'm sorry if I'm yelling if that's loud, but so we're gonna close here on chapter 1. My final thoughts for this chapter is that, it said that he says it in the book, but that this is the cause of racism now. The Karens, the Brads, the Chads, whatever they call the men. White people live in this constant fear of Black folks because they have this guilt about what was done to Black people. And they are afraid that Black people gonna retaliate. They're gonna rise up and retaliate. To me, that's why they're so obsessed with us. That's why we can't have a space just to us. That they always gotta come in, comment. I saw where Ben Shapiro was talking about Sexyy Red. Now, I'm not a fan of Sexyy Red. I don't hate Sexyy Red. I don't agree with the image that she promotes, but I'm not finna stand for no white man talking about her. Like, why are you even watching Sexyy Red's video? Why? Like, that ain't got nothing to do with you, and you speaking on it. They're obsessed. They're obsessed. They're always watching. They're always lurking, trying to figure us out. What are we doing? Even if you familiar with Randy Pyron, I came across him on TikTok, but now I watch him on YouTube. He does the videos that like show 5 things that Black people do in different scenarios. So like how Black people get ready to leave the house, how Black people get off work. And you have white people and Hispanic people in the comments, we do this too. Huh? This is not like, this ain't for y'all. Like, who cares what y'all do? This for us. Like, they are so obsessed. They are obsessed with us, trying to make sure we ain't plotting to take over the world and get vengeance for what for, and we would be 100% justified in doing so if we did. So anyway, going on to chapter 2, I'm gonna have to read from my written notes for this, because in my effort to like go ahead and film this, because I had on my calendar today was the day to put this out, so I had to do this, and I didn't get to reread my notes because I read this a long time ago. So I did put page numbers in my reading notes. So I'm going to just do my best to kind of talk about chapter 2, and anything that I missed or that I want to go more in depth with, I'll just save for the next one. So I don't think that we can fully, chapter 2 is titled Heads, by the way. I don't think that we can fully grasp or comprehend the trauma that slaves went through. We've already talked about the couples and on the auction block being kidnapped, but also being on these slave ships. And something that really, really stood out to me on page 40 was how 10% of the Atlantic slave trade voyages experienced major rebellions. And I know 10% doesn't sound like a lot, but you never hear about rebellion. You never hear we hear about it, but what I mean is when it comes to slavery and education, when it comes to slavery, U.S. history education, we're taught about the conditions that people experience, right? Like, we're taught that they picked cotton. We're taught that, they were raped or whatever. But we're never taught about when they fought back. You have your Nat Turner story here, your Harriet Tubman, she freed everybody, but you don't really talk much about all of the different rebellions. Um, and that was just when I was in school. I graduated high school in 2006. But I feel like they teach even less now because of politics, like your critical race theory. And then not many black folks know the history to begin with. So there are very few that are independently teaching their children. And we've just been miseducated on so many levels that even people like me, I'm sorry, my light fell. But I was just saying that black folks at large, for Americans, period, but especially black people, we have been so miseducated and poorly educated that even people like me who have advanced degrees, I've gone so far as to study for a PhD. There's still history, basic history about black folks and slavery in that period of time that I don't even know. It's just a lot that we don't know. And honestly, that's if you're black. If you're white, you really don't know nothing about true black history. You don't know anything. I had a white woman tell me as recently, like within the last 5 years, that she didn't even know who Emmett Till was, and she lived in Mississippi. So anyway, there's a story on page 40 and 41 about the slave ship voyage, and it was really difficult to read this. Very difficult because it talked about how they had to lay and throw up or vomit, laying in defecation, laying in urination. They had to eat from a bucket. Like it was the women were being raped one by one. Men who died while they were on the ship were just like, it was really terrible and difficult to read all of that. Out of every 5 people who came to the old world, came from the old world to the new, had come from Africa, not Europe. So this shows how the Black American population started to grow. The book goes into a very good detail about Haiti and the Haitian Revolution, and it's so crazy that I happened to be looking this up, and then the African Diaspora News Channel ended up posting a video about Haiti. So if you are, let me see if I can pull it up really quick. I think that was the last screen that I had. But if you want to know more about Haiti, check out this channel, the African, let's see if I can make it bigger. The African Diaspora News Channel just did a video today about Haiti's poverty and the things that Haitians are going through now and how that situation was created. And you see the groundwork for that here in the book. You see that they basically have punished Haiti forever for daring to fight for their own freedom. Like it's crazy. It's crazy. So yeah, from here I'm gonna have to use my own little notes that I wrote to wrap this thing up. So I have here, politicians were only going to ban the slave trade because it was no longer needed. Page 50 goes into detail about how New Orleans experienced a culture war. I thought that was interesting because even if you go to New Orleans now, it's very, very French still. But also I thought it was interesting in on page 50 at the bottom where it talked about the languages that the slaves spoke and how they called them strange Negroes because they were hearing all of these different languages and seeing Africans who had like tribal marks and things like that they were a spectacle. On page 57, it talks about the free black slave catchers. Here we go, coons again. That was crazy. I ain't never seen Django. I feel like this is a Django type of thing, but I didn't even know that black people were around here catching slaves like that. That shit is crazy. And I wrote here in my notes origins of police in America, but I don't know why I wrote that, but I wrote it. It shared the price of individual slaves. Um, I have here page 59. They never stopped seeking freedom, even though they knew the cost. And that's very inspiring. That inspired me. I feel a connection to that. I feel like we should never stop seeking to be free because of the things that slaves went through, because of what our ancestors went through from that era, the Jim Crow era. We should never stop seeking freedom. Like, even if you don't care about your own freedom, your kids' freedom, you should, but it's a lot of people that don't, because folks will rather talk about Keke Palmer and this Usher mess than focus on their children being free from the mental slavery that they're in before you even get to the actual systemic oppression from America. I feel a responsibility, and I try to do everything that I can that's in my within my resources right now to do to bring light to this kind of stuff, because we owe it to them. We like the fact that black people are still living, still alive is a miracle. It is a miracle. And it is just a shame that you have people in my age group. I am 35. I'm a millennial. You have millennials who don't give a damn. So that didn't, like, I can't imagine how little the generation under us, what is it, Generation Z? I can't even imagine how little they care. Like, it's really sad. It's sad that black folks are gonna let America get away with this. It's really sad. Collectively, we should be together. Of course, there are pockets of people like myself who care and who regularly talk about these things, but there are even more of us who don't give a damn. And it's sad. It's really sad. But I'm gonna end here. These are where my notes end. And if there's anything that I missed, I'll cover it in the next discussion, but it's already been almost an hour. But I want to end on this spirit of betrayal, because I think in chapter 2 they talked about one of the slave rebellions and how they like just went from town to town just killing all these white folks, and how you had some slaves to actually turn on the other slaves. And it made me think about just this spirit of betrayal in our community. And I think there's a connection to be made to what we see now, the violence that happens in our community. Sure, people kill each other. It's about proximity. But regardless of that, there was a time when things weren't like they are now. So we can't just use that as an excuse to not talk about this very real issue that we have in our community. You had the coons who betray us, and then just the people who are so gone mentally that they don't even understand that they're annihilating their own people. They're themselves, really. But it's an illusion that unity was destroyed. I do feel like I go back and forth. I don't think that it's over for our community. It's close to being over in terms of like a mass awakening. But there are pockets of people who are about their life when it comes to Black history and Black people. But it seems like that gap is widening every day for common ground, for us to at least be able to agree on the most fundamental things, to be able to fight as a unified group. But it's an illusion. Like, all we have to do is learn our history and get some therapy and heal and open our eyes to the realities that we're living in. Then I think that would be enough to unify us. But we don't have to do that, right? And I had a point about the slaves who told on the other slaves. They still got killed. Like, they didn't gain anything from doing it. So coons, it's not worth it being a coon. You don't gain anything. You might have thought you did, but you didn't, because they came back and got your ass anyway. So on that note, I will end this chapter, or these 2 chapter discussions, right here. If you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up, share it with your Facebook feed, your Instagram feed, Twitter, wherever you hang out on social media. Share this video and let people know how much you liked it. Give me your feedback in the comments. Have you read this book? What did you think about it? If anything was interesting from this video, let me know. Let me know. Let's have a discussion. Also, again, if you want to support this content financially, the banner below is giving you all of the details for that. You can meet me on Patreon and become a member, gain exclusive access to content. And you could also make a one-time donation via Cash App. Everything's in the description box. Everything's on Patreon. And if you still have questions after that, just send me a message. If you only want book club videos from this point forward, make sure you head over to the Unlearning Anti-Blackness Book Club YouTube channel. That was a mouthful. And subscribe. And everything there is strictly books. Everything related to these books. If you stay here with me on the Jessica Diaries, then you'll get to see other content. Anyway, I think I've said enough. I don't know what else to say other than thanks. And I will see you all in the next video. Peace.